And welcome back, Fourth and Long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another off-season supporter series chat. You know we got to get to March, so I reached out to try to find some supporters of all of the clubs, the AFL, the Sandful, the VFL, and the Waffle. So today we are going to do an AFL supporter today, and I have Gareth coming to me from Brisbane. Gareth, thank you for joining me today.
No worries, Donnie. Great to see you. Great to talk to you.
All right. Thankfully, we were finally able to catch up after a few miscommunications on my end. I will take full and complete responsibility for that. So before we hop into the footy, I kind of like knowing just the tiniest bit about the person that I'm chatting with outside of the game of footy. So just a real quick bio about you, Gareth, outside of the game of football.
Sure. So I'm 51 years old. I'm married with three kids. They're all off at school today. So first week of school this week. Originally, grew up in Perth and then moved to Queensland in 2008. And I've done a various sort of careers in my past, and currently work for a large retail chain in logistics.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I already know what club you are, but I'm very interested to see how this goes. I'm very fascinated being a Perth born now in Queensland and the
Mhm.
particular club that you are. So before we get to that, can you tell me just really quick, what is your favorite thing about the sport of footy?
I would say it's just the passion that's involved, the passion of the players, the passion of supporting it, just the enthusiasm, the excitement, the level of excitement that it brings. You know, there's the lead up to the game, talking about what's going to happen, who's going to play, how it's all going to pan out, the actual game itself, the excitement. Although for me, there's not too much excitement being a St Kilda supporter, but then in the post game, you know, the dissection of it all, and just the way that it can consume so much of my life, and it has done, and just brings me, yeah, a lot of passion. Passion is that word that I really think of when I think of being a fan.
I completely agree with you there. The passion of the footy supporters that I have met over the years is absolutely through the roof. I absolutely love it. So let's go back into the memory banks, just the tiniest bit. I want you to go back to it. Can you remember your earliest footy memory?
Yeah, so as I said, growing up in Perth, growing up in sort of the late 70s, early 80s, the WAFL was the big thing for us there. So my parents were from England and Wales, so they didn't get into football, but I kind of got into, following it through, going to school, I guess. So I was an East Fremantle supporter as a kid growing up. I can't remember why, but we had some friends, really good close family friends, who were big Claremont supporters for the WAFL, and they took me to a game, which I'm assuming must have been a Claremont Oval. I was probably 8 or 9, 10 maybe, somewhere around there. I can't really remember the game, but I remember going onto the field afterward the game, and they had mounted policemen on horses. And I can remember one of my friends went too close to the horse, and the horse kind of reared, and we all thought it was hilarious, but obviously, I imagine it wasn't for the police officer or the horse. But just back then, going to WAFL games, it was huge back then for us, and that was pretty much our football experience.
Yeah, a lot of history with the waffle there. So you kind of snuck it in there a little bit, but I gotta ask, how does a guy born in WA become a who's your club again supporter? And how did you become
Yeah.
this team's supporter?
So as I said, you always had your WAFL team, and that's when WAFL was really big. But you knew of the VFL, and so we always had a VFL team as well, kind of our backup team. Not really any other leagues, but just VFL. So I'd sort of toyed around with a couple of clubs because I sort of, like I'd met someone from Geelong, and I'll be a Geelong supporter for a bit. But then I was sort of about 15, and I thought, I need to go for a VFL team. This is before the West Coast Eagles started. So I was really into a band from Melbourne called Weddings Parties Anything, and their lead singer was a St Kilda supporter. So I thought, I'll go for the Saints. Not doing any research at all into St Kilda or their history or where they were. So the 1980s was a pretty dire time for the Saints, but just going along with that passion of the music, which I really loved, and thought go for the Saints. And then so 1 or 2 years later, the Eagles came about, and I just decided already I was embedded in St Kilda by then, and so I thought, no, I'm not going to go for the Eagles, and so that started, well, my love of St Kilda, and then my dislike / hatred of West Coast Eagles as well. And so I've stuck with it ever since. Even when Freo came out, I was still in Perth, and I thought that being an East Fremantle supporter growing up, I could change to Freo, but I thought, no, I'm going to stick with it. And then by the time we moved to Queensland, I was still, I thought, no, there's no way I'm going to change. So that's it.
A diehard Saints supporter. I gotta admit, I admire you, sir. I admire you a lot because the temptation I bet for you to go to the Eagles or go to Freo or now being in Queensland, even the Brisbane Lions, I said probably has been pretty hard, but I admire your stubborn ability to stay with the Saints. I absolutely adore that. That is fantastic. So, as you kind of said, your mother and father were not from Australia. So I got to ask, how's the family separation when it comes? How's the family kind of dichotomy when it comes to football supporting? Have any of your other family members picked other clubs? And then if they do, how's the banter when your teams play?
So my brother, he goes to the West Coast, but he's not a really big supporter. So, he gives me heaps generally when West Coast win, and I give him a bit, but it doesn't mean as much. My wife hates sport and football in general. So my biggest excitement with her was or not in football terms, I should say, was when I took her to the Gold Coast to when St Kilda were playing, and she got so excited that she yelled out "Milne" when Steve Milne kicked the goal. So that was her peak of football supporting. And then as I said, I got 3 kids, none of them like football as well. So they just talk about how much they dislike football, and I think partly, rebellion to their father. So anyway, we've brainwashed them, and it just hasn't worked out. So hopefully one day, but yeah. But so really, in terms of family, there's very little banter. It's more just mates, and obviously being a lone supporter or a minority supporter in a place like Western Australia or even here in Brisbane, it's a lot of fun. I cop a lot, but I do give out a lot as well. So it's all a bit of fun.
Give and take, give and take. I love it. So, and an
Yeah,
isolated person you are. I know how you feel. My wife is
yeah,
not a huge sports person herself. So sometimes it's fun when she takes interest in it. I celebrate the little victories when you get them. So let's go back to your love of St. Kilda. Let's have you have some fun here. Can you remember the first Saints item you were ever given or bought?
So would have been early 20s. I actually went to Melbourne to visit a mate. It wasn't during the footy season, but I remember, the excitement. Then went down to Richmond where there was a lot of outlet stores and that sort of thing. So I bought this St Kilda rain jacket, sort of big jacket that I had very 90s sort of look to it, like sort of shiny fabric. And I used to wear that during winter all the time. So that was my favorite jacket for a long time. And that was the first Saints thing. It was just so hard to get merchandise over in Western Australia back in the early days. So yeah, that was the first thing that I got given. But I've been given a lot of. I got given a dummy once because apparently I spit the dummy a fair bit. So that's one of the funny.
Oh, absolutely love it. That's fantastic. All right. So I've already gotten a little bit of this, but I love this question just because again, I've said this in almost on all the podcasts on this is being a fan is a unique experience and nobody fans exactly the same. Everybody fans differently. Some are diehard. Some people think diehard has a negative connotation. So I always like hearing people kind of explain to it. Can you kind of explain to me your fandom of the Saints? Are you somebody that you have to watch every single game that you can't? If you can't watch it, you will at least watch the replay. Do you listen to it on the radio if it's not on the telly? What kind of describe your fandom of St. Kilda for me a little bit?
Yeah, look, very long-suffering fandom, and I guess it's probably ebbed and flowed over the years. There's been times where I've watched as much as I could, read as much as I could. Other times where it's obviously just with, just especially early on in sort of the 90s in Perth, you just didn't get many games on TV, so it was very hard to watch the games or even replays, anything like that. So try and listen to things on the radio. And even coming now, like I don't have any, pay TV, so it's hard to see everything. But can watch replays or highlights at least if I can, or try and listen to it on the radio. It's just, fitting in with life. I think that's the hard thing. I work on weekends at times, so again, it's hard to listen, but I'm always following the scores and watching what's happening. So, and funny thing, one of my groomsmen at our wedding said to my wife that, you can know that Gareth will always stick with you because he's stuck with the Saints this long. And so at times I've actually thought, I've had enough. I've just had enough. It's just been too miserable. They've let me down again. I'm going to change. And then I think, oh no, if I change, what's going to happen is that they will win the premiership just to mess with me. And it's always personal. And those bastards will just, and I'll miss out. And then the team that I change to will just endure misery. So I tend to, again, my passion goes with the game. So I very much ride the game. When we lose, I get really miserable and I sulk, and I'm, not always a good person to be around. There's been numerous times where my wife has had to pick my jumper up out of the bin because I've just thrown it away in disgust. And when you're watching your team, and it's just not necessarily the fact that they lose, but it's the way they lose. Mm-hmm. When you're disappointed at the loss, but also just the way that they've either just given up or you just expect so much more. So, so I guess I used to, consume a lot more, media and things like that, but I've kind of changed. I think I've probably changed the way that I consume stuff as well, and don't watch all the shows these days. I tend to find a lot of times just the same people saying the same things, and it just gets a bit tiring. So I've been, looking for new or, interesting ways to digest things. We lived in Africa in 2014 and 15. So which is obviously really interesting because, no one over there knows what AFL or Australian rules football is about. So it's hard again, but I managed to see a couple of games that were on pay TV in Kenya. So that was fun, sitting in a bar with no one else knowing what's going on. But then coming home, it's just, great, and back into it. So it's good.
Fantastic. Absolutely love that. Like, I love that story. And it is fascinating now that I've connected with international fans, not just here in the States, but England and some of the other countries. And surprisingly, footy is growing. And I think a lot of Australians don't really know that it's growing outside of Australia at a rate that I think is very, very cool to see, especially over here in the States. I think it's growing a lot more than I think some people expect. And I tell a lot of people, Australians, I said, if you ever have to go to the States, I said, pick the second week in October and come to USAFL Nationals, because if you want to see footy in the States where everybody that's there are footy mad, come to USAFL Nationals. It is 2 days of footy. There are 5 fields all going at the same time, and it is an absolute treat to see some of the best throughout the country play footy that are Americans. So I always tell most of my Australians, I said, if you ever want to travel over to the States, pick the second weekend in October, double check with the USAFL and come to Nationals, because it is worth the trip for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll go from that. So you said your first ever game was it was a waffle game. Can you remember the first game, the Saints game this first ever Saints game you ever attended?
Yeah, it was. I think it was 1999. It was a Friday night game at the WACA, the WACA ground. So St Kilda versus West Coast Eagles. I think we got beaten, but again, just being part of the crowd, and obviously the West Coast Eagles that's probably the second or third season, so they were pretty entrenched by then. And the crowd was a big crowd, and the WACA was a great place to watch football. There's this grass bank at the ends where the goals were, and so it's very old school, but a really good venue to watch it. So again, just being part of that and just being able to let myself go. I'm very vocal. So generally, if I leave the game and I don't have a hoarse throat or I've lost my voice a bit, I've wasted my time. So yeah, it was just a great experience.
When you go, you make sure people know that you went. So I love it.
Yes,
Absolutely
right.
love it. All right. So yes, the Saints haven't had as great of records, but I think they've had some really good players. So I got to ask this: do you have a favorite player of the past? And do you have a favorite player currently on the Saints list?
So my all-time favorite player is Robert Harvey.
Hmm.
I was just privileged to see him at his peak. Just see win 2 Brownlow medals, 350 games, just an absolute legend of the game. Just the power that he played, his just ability to get round players, just the skills that he had, his running ability. I just there's legendary stories of just him, just the amount of punishment that he put his body through to be able to, just to play the game. And yeah, just love watching him play. So yeah, he's my all-time favorite player. My current favorite player, probably Marcus Windhager, probably at the moment. Just love the way that he started that season. Just look like someone who just desperately wants to play AFL football and have a really good career. Before that, it was Jaron Geary, and who was kind of a polarizing figure amongst St Kilda supporters because he wasn't the most skilled player, but he gave everything. And I just love seeing that a guy, he came off the rookie list who just gave his whole, as much as he could in order to do the very best that he could. And to captain your club is a huge honour. And I think a lot of people didn't realise what he brought to the team, but he just brought leadership and inspiration. So yeah, that's where I'm at with favourite players.
Alrighty. I'm gonna give you the chance to have a fun memory because I know sometimes it hasn't always been there.
Yeah,
Most memorable moment as a St. Kilda supporter.
I'd say the 1997 preliminary final. We were playing North Melbourne, who were just incredible at the time. Wayne Carey was just at his peak. And so we beat them, and just, knowing that we were going into a grand final, which was our first grand final since 1971 and the first one that I'd been able to know about. So, yeah, I just remember that just being an incredible game. I really wasn't sure if we could win, but we did. And just the knowledge we were going into the grand final, and just that week of being in, grand final lead up, and just to enjoy all those things that you do as a supporter when your team's playing in the grand final.
Awesome. Hey, and those are always the moments that you absolutely love. All right. Unfortunately, we go from the great, to the fun one. This I hate asking this question because we went back and forth, and some of your responses were absolutely fantastic to me when we were chatting. So I'll ask, what are your thoughts on this last season as a St. Kilda supporter? Because as we said before we started the mic, this has been a team that for me, as I've covered the AFL the last 3 seasons, this has been a team that has frustrated me because if you look at their list, I think this team should be in the contention for finals every single year. And this last season was one that thankfully you don't have a ton of hair because you'd be pulling it out with how frustrated you were this year.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think we started really well, winning early games, which is always good. And just I really like the style of play that they were still playing last year. Was that sort of chaotic football, just a lot of run. Just the ball was going forward. They were kicking goals, but then something happened and they just seemed to stop. Probably the worst was the game St Kilda versus Port Adelaide, which was up in Cairns, which is northern Queensland, and
Mhm.
uh, it was a wet game. It wasn't raining, but just because of the humidity, it just created the ball was not, it was wet and horrible. The players, obviously, the adapting to the humidity was really struggling, and we were up by 4 or 5 goals against Port, but Port came back and won the game, and it was like there was just a confidence that they could get so far, but then they just stopped. And I think that happens a lot of teams, that it's very much a mental thing, a confidence thing, and then we've just fell away the rest of the season. So I really thought that we should have started the season with expectation of playing in the eight, and to finish out of that was really disappointing. So it was just a frustrating season. Having said that, there was a couple of first year players like Windhager that I mentioned. Nazaya Malera Wanganeen was another guy who, was our number one draft pick for us, who showed a lot. And so there was glimpses, there were signs that there was some good things happening. But again, as a team, I think we let ourselves down.
Yeah, definitely. And before I go to the next question, I got to ask this, and I prepped you a little bit for this. I got to ask, there were two teams that made coaching changes this offseason that just baffled me. They kind of, and again, how much when why they happened are still kind of befuddled to me, especially the Essendon one. But your coaching change was the most ironic one of them all because you re-sign your coach in the middle of the season and then fire him as soon as the season ends. So your thoughts on the kind of crazy way that St. Kilda ended out relieving their coach of their duties, and then what are your thoughts of the new hire?
Yeah, it was really bad. I mean, it just shows that there's something going on there with the higher leadership. You can't change your mind about a coach. And I mean, this could cover, whether it's business or any other sort of sphere, that if you say to someone that they're the person you want to lead the team or organization, and then 2 or 3 months later you say no, the coach didn't change. I mean, Brett Ratton, obviously the season didn't finish where we wanted, and maybe that was the case. I don't know. But he hadn't changed. It was obviously a change of decision in terms of, they decided, no, we don't want him. Now, then we had this sort of limbo that, well, what's going to happen? And I sort of think, well, if they're going to fire him, they obviously have someone in mind. And then the rumours started going on about Ross Lyon. Mm-hmm. And whether it was that kind of dangle that Ross Lyon was possibly available and wanted to come back to coaching, they thought, oh, we're going to do this. So I'm happy that Ross Lyon's back because he led us to 2 grand finals, well, 3 to count the draw. He could have been an absolute legend of the club if the ball had gone the right way instead of the other way. There would have been statues erected to him or outside Moorabbin, but it didn't quite work that way. And then obviously he left us for Freo, which I was really dark at the time. I was pretty angry with him. But yeah, I think it's a good appointment, and it just seems like things are in a good space at the moment. But it just was a strange time period.
It was just very weird. I sat there as I was watching all of this kind of come out, and it's like, and the Essendon one was a giant cluster, in the first place.
Yeah.
But St. Kilda sure tried to do a hold my beer moment, and it really fascinated me with how much both those two teams. I think they were trying to one up each other on how they could not handle a coach the best, and it was fascinating. Again, I'm not trying to make fun of your Saints. I really do respect the Saints organization because it is a proud club, but holy shnikes, I just sat there and went, are they trying to make everybody laugh at them? Like it was really kind of that bad. And again, I think Ross Lyon is an absolutely fantastic hire. My worry is the game past him. Yes, he was a great coach for so long, but he has been out for a couple of seasons. Yes, he was doing some of the radio broadcasts, and his insight was fantastic to listen to. I really, really hope it's not past him. That's my one and only worry about the hire. I think discipline is what this Saints team needs. Ross is going to do that. I know that for sure. So it'll be a very, very interesting season at Moorabbin this year for sure. So we'll join off that. So we already talked about the coaching a little bit. They're off season. Do you keep track of the off season, the draft, the sign and trade period? And if so, kind of what were your thoughts on that? And if not, are you just one of those, I'll figure out when we get closer to the season?
No, I do. Yeah, I follow what's happening with the draft and try and look at the who we possibly get and just find out a little bit about them. I'm probably not obsessive in terms of going through all of these kids' stats and everything like that. Obviously, we didn't redo much in the trade period, which that's okay because we didn't really have a lot of players that we were targeting, or I don't think we sort of seemed like a good destination at the time. But it looks like there's some good kids. Obviously, as a Saints supporter, the off-season is our best time of the year because we're not actually playing games. We can't lose. And anyone we draft is going to win multiple Brownlows and lead us to premiership glory. apart from the reality that doesn't actually happen. But it's a good time where I can just relax and just enjoy and dream of what may happen. So and obviously we get the great stories of such and such is beefed up in the gym 5 kilos and they're training the house down, and so there's all the stories of these guys and and the pictures of them with their new haircuts and the tans and they've put the weight on and muscled up and everything like that. So it's all good at this point in time, Donnie.
Yeah, we're still at that time period when you can believe that you have a chance to win the flag. It's the first 5
Yes.
games of the season is when disasters and nightmares potentially could happen, especially
Yeah.
so already. Um, I asked this question and I wrote this question out. And again, it's one of those, maybe it's just me, but I wrote the question out and I kind of kicked myself because I don't like the wording. Is I asked, what are your expectations for next year? And again, this is me personally. I hate saying expectations because it puts I know this is going to happen, when I think we all know footy is bonkers at times and you never know, an injury, an ACL could change, anything like that. So what are your thoughts on next season? Do you think the Saints could pop back up the ladder? Do you think they have a chance for finals? Because if I look at their list, there's a chance. I think they're competing for finals in what I think is going to be a deep chances for playoffs. I think there's 14 teams that potentially could fight for playoffs for the finals next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should be up there. I do fall into expectations, which obviously is very dangerous and leads to disappointment. But yeah, I think last year I thought we really should have been the trajectory of where we were going. We should have made finals. And so, again, I think that's the case again. I think Ross Lyon will bring some discipline, as you said. One of the things, I guess, one of his strengths is he gets players to buy in to a plan. And the Saints under him were very good at playing to that plan. So hopefully we can get that back. And it just seems like there's a good culture going on at the moment. So I'm looking forward to the season. But as you said, it can all go pear-shaped very quickly.
You just never know. You always go in super positive, and it's the first 5 games that will put you where you most sometimes could put you exactly where you think you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, alrighty, I'm gonna have a little bit of fun. I know over here in the States, everybody wants to be the general manager. Everybody wants to be the guy that makes the move. So I'm gonna let you have some fun now.
Yeah.
I'm going to install you as the St. Kilda list manager for one day. You can make one move and bring in one player from the entire AFL competition. So all 17 teams are free and open. You can get any player. Who's the one player you bring to Moorabbin and why?
So I think I'd go with Lachie Neale from Brisbane, who is just an incredible player. I think we need more midfield class and grunt. And he brings that. He's dependable. His body is pretty reliable. So I think he would just make a big difference to us. I was thinking through this and I thought, what about Nat Fyfe? Because I thought Nat Fyfe would be someone, and Ross Lyon loves Nat Fyfe, but I just don't think his body is quite strong enough. And, obviously the injury problems. I was thinking about Christian Petrarca as well, because he's another one that would just give us a lot. But again, I think, Lachie Neale, I think, would just really give us a big lift, would just teach a lot to the younger players in terms of how to play the game to the best of their ability. And I think he would be the one that would really make a big difference for us.
Yeah, I think he would fit in really well at Moorabbin for sure. Alrighty, so I'm gonna love this next question because as a WA born living in Queensland now, and being a VFL fan, I'm always fascinated by this, is that the grand final saw itself outside of Victorian soil in 2020 and 2021. And I was surprised listening to some of the coverage that Victorian media, which is notoriously Victorian biased, again, not saying anything that nobody doesn't know, I was surprised to hear them start to kind of bring up the topic of maybe potentially that the grand final should be looked at as being a traveling grand final. And again, comment section, I know the 50-year contract. Let's pie in the sky here. Stay with me, please. Okay. For you, are you one of those that you kind of like that idea that potentially seeing the grand final, see WA again, maybe Adelaide, back to Queensland, maybe even Sydney? Or are you one of those that you kind of like the tradition of the MCG and that tradition that it is technically the VFL, now AFL?
I do. I like the travelling grand final. I think it's provided a lot the last 2 years with being in Queensland and then WA. I think it's given a different flavour to it, and it's allowed fans to enjoy it a lot differently. But I can see, obviously, disregarding the actual contract, but just the MCG holds 100,000 people, and so Optus Stadium is 60,000, and that's really the big thing. So as well, until we get bigger grounds around the country, I think it's going to struggle to really have a good case to put forward to why it shouldn't be in Melbourne. But I think it was great to have it up here in Queensland, and I think obviously WA, they loved it over there. So I think it's a really positive thing, and I think it just allows for change, which I think the country, the league needs change all the time. So yeah, I think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, there is no perfect answer. And again, that 50-year contract is making it like I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime and many lifetimes, but it's fun to discuss because I thought it was
Yes.
fascinating that the Victorian media was kind of the ones that brought it up. So speaking of the AFL, we're going to go to this upcoming season, and I'm very fascinated by this that being in Queensland now, I bet you know all about the NRL's Magic Round, where the AFL decided, oh, Magic Round, that's cool, let's do something similar and call it Gather Round, as they are going to find themselves in South Australia for one of the rounds this season, with all 9 games being in South Australia. So, as a footy fan, what are your thoughts on Gather Round? And then I know as a family man, is there any thoughts of potentially finding your way to SA to try to catch a few games?
No, I won't be able to go. It's a good thing. I probably haven't really paid attention to it an awful lot. I've just thought, it's just another round. I haven't really looked at who we're playing. I don't even know or where we're playing. I know some of the grounds are obviously going to be Adelaide Oval, other grounds, some of the more suburban grounds. So, but I think it's a good opportunity to try something new and see how it goes. If it comes up to Queensland, I'd love to be able to get along to some of the games. And it's just a good opportunity for fans to see other teams play, apart from just, Saints playing Brisbane or Gold Coast up here. So it's a bit like when we had COVID, when a lot of the teams are up here in Queensland. So we got to see other games. You got to see, like I went to see St Kilda versus Geelong, which is, a real, an opportunity for me. We got smashed, but anyway, that's it. But good opportunities. I think it's a good initiative.
It'll be fast. It'll be fascinating. I think I believe that there's 5 games in the Adelaide Oval, and then 4 others. There's one out in the wine country, the Barossa Valley, which will be interesting. I think North Melbourne is in that one, and then a couple at Norwood, and then one at Glenelg. So there's not a huge separate. There's not there. Most of it is going to be at Adelaide Oval, which I mean is nice, but I just hope, I pray and cross my fingers it's not wet, because the Sunday games are going to be absolutely disastrous if it is not pristine weather in Adelaide, because 5 games on one ground is going to be fun enough as it is. So, alrighty. So anybody that watches this channel knows I am a huge advocate and supporter of women's footy. I think it is a growth area for the AFL that is going to be a way to keep the AFL going, because it is a huge growth market because of the growth of youth footy. So I asked, do you keep an eye on the AFLW? And do you keep an eye on the Saints AFLW team? If so, what were your thoughts in their season this last year?
Yeah, I love the AFLW. I love the opportunity that it gives to women footballers and girls growing up now who have actually got a pathway and something to aim for. So I've loved what it brings. I love the diversity that it brings to the AFL landscape and to the sport. The Saints, we've been disappointing. Obviously, we're an expansion club, and it's been really hard for the expansion clubs to get going. We lost Tilly Rudd Lucas to Hawthorn.
Yep.
Lucas right there, sorry, yeah. And
it's fine.
He was one of our
too many names.
Players.
Too many names.
Too many names, yeah. But I've been disappointed, I guess. It feels a bit like St Kilda haven't really put their whole energy behind it. Nick Del Santo was a great player, loved him as a player, loved his media work, but he really had very little coaching experience. And I think one of the things that an AFL women's team needs is a really good, strong development process, development coaching. And I don't feel like that's happening. So I think that, that needs to, well, I would hope that becomes a bigger focus for the next season and whenever the next season is. I think the AFL need to put a lot more effort into actually planning for the AFLW. And because, as you said, it's a massive growth area. And I think that the men's game, we're going to get more fans, but really we've reached the peak almost, whereas the peak is a long way away for the AFLW and for women's football in general.
100% agree with you. I think that's my biggest argument point is I think the men's game, the only way it's going to have a chance to expand is if they get the license in Tassie and then potentially the 20th license wherever it's going to be, whether if they try to get it in the Northern Territory or another in Perth or wherever. I've heard several different things. But I think the women it's a perfect growth opportunity. There's so much there. And now that there's pathways from 5 years old to professional is fantastic. I keep telling people, keep an eye on it. You think the league is strong. It's going to get stronger. Until these women are full-time professional, there is going to be a little bit of a problem when it comes to diversity, when it comes to talent, because there is a ton of talent in South Australia. There's a ton of talent in Victoria. There's a ton of talent in WA. It's just not harnessed as well right now, but I think it's on the move. New South Wales, Queensland has been solid. I think the Brisbane Lions Academy and the Gold Coast Academy have been fantastic. They have been producing great. Right now, the issue is New South Wales. It's not growing the way they need it to. So until the entire competition is full-time professional to where these women can be drafted and go throughout the country, I think some teams are going to continue to struggle because of talent wise, but I still think it's eventually going to get there. And when it does, it's going to be glorious to watch. So I got to ask, do you have a favorite player on the women's team and who is it and why?
I love Caitlin Greisner, just the G Train. I love
Train,
that.
love her.
What I love about the AFLW is that the difference in the women in terms of their ages, but also their bodies as well. You've got a much greater difference in just, naturally their physique and body shape, which just allows for a wider opportunity for people to play. You don't have to be, thin person with muscles, that sort of thing. So I think it just gives a lot of opportunity. I got a real soft spot for Alice Burke. I think just, son of Nathan Burke, club legend. And I really hope that she has a great career. But again, I think she's someone who needs more development. So, they're the ones that I enjoy watching.
Georgia Patrikios is an absolute gun in the midfield. Absolutely yes. Love her game. She's absolutely fantastic. So it really was kind of interesting having her miss out for the year, but I'm glad that she's back playing footy for sure. So alrighty. So I've told many people this. I have not been to Australia. It is on my bucket list. I want to go. So I'm doing a little bit of research. So when I go to a game, I'm ready. So I asked this. As an American, we love our food at the sporting events. So I got to ask this, what's your go-to food when you go to the footy?
Probably hot chips with a bit of tomato sauce. That works well for me. I'm gluten-free, so I don't go the meat pies. But yeah, so a bucket of hot chips is just an easy to eat in the seats and easy to get through. So yeah, love those.
Fantastic. And surprising, it's been much more of a popular answer than I was expecting. The meat pie is the number one, but the hot chips actually are solid number two. That they've been a very very popular one. So alrighty, when you go to the footy, where is your ideal place to sit that you think is the best possible place to sit to watch a game of footy?
Oh, look, I'd love to sort of sit on the wing, maybe on the just sort of first row, but generally that's not possible because that's either a corporate box or just insanely expensive. So I love sitting down on the ground, like on the ground level, just near the fence, because even though you don't get a great look at the whole game, but you just see everything up close, and it comes back to that passion. You just see things closer. You hear the hits, you feel it, you hear the boot on the ball when they kick it, and I love being part of that. And especially we've had games either at the Gabba or at Metricon Stadium where the St Kilda supporters all gang together, and often we're either behind the goals or the cheer squad, and so there's just that great feeling there of being part of something. And I love that. Being just near it and hearing it and being able to almost feel it myself.
Not a problem. I absolutely love it. All righty. Last question I always ask, and I love this because this is one that brings up so many different ones. I've actually looked some of these up, some of the answers that I've gotten. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen, live, on the telly, at the ground, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen?
Probably 2 years ago, I took my son down to Metricon. So we were playing Brisbane down there, and there was a pocket of St Kilda supporters. Saints were playing really well. It was a tight first couple of halves, but the first couple of quarters, just to say, and then we won by about 40 points. And as I said, my son doesn't like football, but just being able to share it with him, and he really enjoyed it. He loved being part of it. And there was just a great group of St Kilda supporters, and we were just giving it to the Brisbane Lions supporters, and it was just so much fun. And they started. I love it when the other team leave, the supporters leave early, when they can see their teams leaving, because I just think no matter what, you've got to stay to the end of the game, no matter what. And we started singing the na 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 hey goodbye, and it was just so much
Ultimate
fun.
troll job.
And absolutely, that's what I love. So that was a really special time, and I was with one of my best friends, who's a St Kilda supporter, and his kids, and so we just had a great time together. That's one of the things that put a big smile on my face right now.
That is fantastic. Absolutely love it. And again, everybody has a different one for sure. So alrighty. Well, Gareth, that is it for my questions. This has been a fantastic conversation. Again, as you kind of said, you were definitely the brooding St. Kilda supporter, which again, I completely understand. And again, I appreciate your passion for the St. Kilda Saints. This has been a fantastic conversation. So thank you again for joining me today.
Thanks, Donnie. It's been great.
Awesome. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode today. Again, more episodes still coming out. Waffles supporters, Sample supporters, VFL, and obviously more AFL supporters. Keep an eye out. We're going to get to March. We're going to get to the men's season. Keep an eye out when we will be back with another episode very, very soon.